My name is Thomas Riley, and I should have known something was wrong the moment Sarah suggested we throw a big celebration for our 15th wedding anniversary. I should have trusted my gut when she started picking out the venue, the fancy dress, and when she spent hours getting ready, making sure everything was perfect. It's funny how, in hindsight, the little signs are so clear. But at the time I thought it was just Sarah being Sarah, the successful, ambitious woman who always needed to be the center of attention. Millfield, Ohio, is one of those towns where everybody knows your business whether you want them to or not. I've lived here my whole life, running Riley's Auto Works, fixing up old muscle cars for folks who wanted to relive their glory days. My life isn't glamorous, but it's real. My hands are stained with motor oil, my back aches from hours of hard work, and I've got scars on my knuckles from wrestling with stubborn bolts and sharp edges. But I take pride in it. It's honest work, and that's more than I can say about what Sarah does. Sarah's different. She's always been the ambitious one in our relationship, the one who's always climbing the corporate ladder, always chasing after the next big promotion, the next big deal. I don't begrudge her for it. I admire her drive even if I don't always understand it. She works as a marketing executive at a big tech company, always looking polished, always in control. Meanwhile, I'm the guy in the grease-stained work clothes, stuck in a world of rust and metal. But something changed in the last few years. I noticed her pulling away from me. More late nights at the office. More trips that seemed to have no clear reason. I started to feel like I was living with a stranger. But I told myself it was just stress from work, that we were just in a rough patch. I didn't want to believe anything else. The night of our anniversary party, everything seemed off. Sarah was more glamorous than usual, slipping into a black dress that probably cost more than most people make in a month. She spent an hour on her makeup, making sure everything was perfect. I asked her who she was texting, but she just smiled that smile of hers and said it was work. I didn't question it, though I should have. The party was at the Millfield Grand Hotel, the fanciest place in town. She booked the best ballroom and we had a full guest list. Her colleagues from the tech company, our neighbors, some of my friends from the shop, and a few family members. Everything seemed normal at first, just a fancy party to celebrate a milestone in our marriage. I shook hands, accepted congratulations, tried to enjoy the night. Sarah worked the room like the professional she was, telling stories and laughing, charming people with ease. But as the evening wore on, I started to notice something strange in the air. Sarah was distant, almost too distant. She kept glancing at her phone, texting furiously, then deleting the messages. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was overthinking things. But then the dance came. The band started playing Unchained Melody, our song from years ago. The one we danced to on our wedding day. I held out my hand, expecting Sarah to join me for our traditional first dance, the one we had done at every anniversary. But Sarah hesitated, then stepped back with that familiar calculating smile of hers. She took the microphone from the band leader, and the music came to a sudden stop. The room fell silent. It was as if someone had hit the mute button on the entire world. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah's voice rang out, smooth and confident, carrying across the room. "Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate 15 years of marriage to my husband, Thomas. But before we continue, I need to say something." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. My stomach turned. This wasn't right. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. "Over the last few years," Sarah continued, her eyes scanning the crowd but never once meeting mine, "I've fallen in love with someone else. Someone who understands me in ways my husband never could. This dance is for him, the man I've secretly loved for years." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze. My hand was still outstretched like a fool, while Sarah walked past me like I was invisible. The room was deathly quiet. I could hear the soft clinking of glasses, the distant hum of the air conditioning, but it all felt so far away. And then she walked straight to David. David, my brother. They stood there, in front of everyone, dancing as if nothing was wrong. I stood there in the middle of the room, completely paralyzed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, anything at them. But I couldn't. The crowd didn't know whether to gasp, clap, or leave. Most of them just stood frozen, mouths hanging open. I could see some people already typing on their phones, no doubt spreading the news of what they just witnessed. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a break. It wasn't a crack. It was more like a rope that had been stretched too far and it finally gave way. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I wasn't going to let this go. Not without a fight. As the night went on, I walked over to Sarah's father, Greg. He was standing near the bar, his face pale as he watched his daughter dance with my brother. I didn't even have to say anything. He knew. He could feel the weight of the moment. "Did you tell her about the Riley trust?" I asked him, my voice low but cutting. Greg's face went even whiter. He shook his head. What are you talking about? I could see it in his eyes. He knew exactly what I was talking about. The Riley Trust. A family asset set up by my grandfather, a fund that only male members of the Riley family could access. I had the power to approve or deny any request for the trust. And I knew Rhett had been trying to get his hands on it for years. But not like this. Not at the expense of my dignity. Not by betraying me, his own brother. I pulled out my phone. It was time to put a plan into motion. I had my own contingency. I'd been watching Sarah's every move for months. I'd seen the small withdrawals from our joint accounts. She thought I didn't notice. But I did. I transferred every last penny out of our shared accounts and into one that she couldn't touch. And I sent a message to her closest friends, her bridesmaids, telling them about how she had been draining our savings for her own selfish needs. Then I made the call. I contacted the hotel manager, posing as a concerned guest, claiming there was a gas leak in the building and the place needed to be evacuated for safety reasons. Within minutes, the exits were locked and the guests were beginning to panic. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Sarah had no idea what was coming. And I was just getting started. The minutes after Sarah and David's humiliating dance felt like hours. The air in the ballroom was thick with tension, but the show went on as if nothing had happened. People started to leave, still reeling from what they'd just witnessed. I could see Sarah trying to act like everything was fine, smiling at her friends, laughing off the situation like it was just another drama. But I knew better. I knew what was happening behind those perfect painted lips. I took a deep breath and forced myself to remain calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I needed to think. I needed to plan my next move, and I wasn't going to let Sarah or anyone else see me break down. Not now. Not when I had something much bigger in mind. I headed to the bar, trying to make my way through the crowd of confused faces. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to act normal. I grabbed a drink and downed it in one go. It burned, but the heat of the alcohol didn't come close to matching the fire that was raging inside me. I caught a glimpse of Sarah, still dancing with David, laughing, acting like she hadn't just shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. That was when I made a decision. This wasn't just about a betrayal. It wasn't just about Sarah cheating with my brother. This was bigger. It was about power. It was about control. I left the party, stepping out into the cool night air. The chaos inside faded, and for a moment I could hear my own thoughts. I needed to hit them where it would hurt. I didn't have the luxury of being the nice guy anymore. I drove back to my garage. It wasn't much to look at, just a small shop in the industrial part of town, surrounded by old, forgotten factories. But to me it was home. It was a place where I had control. I parked my truck and went straight to the back office, where I kept my personal files. I sat at my desk and pulled out the legal documents I'd been sitting on for years, the papers that my grandfather had left behind about the Riley Trust. It was time for Sarah and Rhett to learn what it meant to mess with the wrong guy. I spent the next hour going over the details of the trust, making sure I knew every clause and restriction. My grandfather had set it up decades ago, back when the Rileys had real money, and the rules were clear. Only male descendants could access the funds, and it required the approval of the eldest living male heir, me. I knew Rhett had been trying for years to get his hands on it, but he needed my signature. That was the leverage I needed. But that wasn't all. I had been quietly monitoring our finances for the last few months. I'd seen Sarah's reckless spending. She thought I didn't notice the small withdrawals from our joint account, the extravagant shopping trips, the dinners, the weekends away. She thought she could keep it all hidden. But I wasn't blind. I'd set up a contingency plan months ago just in case. I moved quickly. I transferred every penny from our joint accounts into my private account. It wasn't much, just enough to make sure Sarah couldn't touch it. She had been draining our savings, planning her escape, but I was going to make sure she felt the consequences. I didn't trust her anymore. And I wasn't going to let her have what was mine. After the transfer, I sent a message to her closest friends, her bridesmaids, warning them about her financial habits. I didn't know if they'd believe me, but it didn't matter. Once the truth was out, there would be no going back. But the real kicker? The hotel. I called the manager under the guise of a concerned guest and claimed that there was a gas leak in the building. I told them to lock all exits immediately, and within minutes the entire ballroom was locked down. People started panicking. The hotel staff was scrambling to figure out what was going on, and the guests were stuck inside, unsure of what was happening. That's when I called Sarah. I let the phone ring for a moment before picking it up. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I hope you're enjoying the party." "What the hell, Thomas?" Her voice was tight, panicked. What's going on? Why is the building locked down? I could hear the fear in her voice, and for the first time in a long time, it felt good. I thought you'd like to know. I've taken care of a few things while you were busy embarrassing me in front of everyone. I've transferred every dime out of our accounts, and you won't be able to touch a cent. Enjoy your night. I hung up before she could respond. By the time I returned to the hotel, the chaos had started. People were whispering in groups, trying to figure out what was going on. I kept my distance, watching from the sidelines. I could see Sarah still trying to keep it together, but I could tell the walls were closing in. David, my brother, was there too. He was in the middle of a small group, acting as if nothing was wrong. But I knew better. He knew. He knew that I had just taken the first step in dismantling everything they thought they had. I waited until the crowd was scattered, then I made my move. I approached Sarah, who was standing alone near the back of the ballroom. She looked up at me, her face a mixture of frustration and anger. What did you do, Thomas? She hissed. What the hell is wrong with you? I looked her in the eye and smiled, a cold, calculated smile. I'm just getting started, Sarah. You wanted to play dirty, so now it's my turn. Her eyes flickered with panic, but she quickly masked it with a thin veneer of anger. You can't do this. You'll regret it. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked away, leaving her to stew in her own mess. The game had changed, and Sarah and Rhett would soon learn that messing with me came with consequences. And I wasn't going to stop until they had lost everything. The next few days felt like a blur. The party had been the first domino to fall, and now everything I had been planning was set in motion. Millfield, with its quiet streets and close-knit community, buzzed with rumors. People whispered behind their hands when they saw me at the grocery store or the gas station. The whole town had witnessed Sarah's betrayal, and they were eager to talk about it. But as the whispers grew, so did my resolve. Sarah had tried to call me multiple times. I ignored every one of her calls, letting her voicemail fill up. I wasn't ready to talk yet. I wasn't ready to hear her explanations, her lies. I had no interest in listening to her justify her actions. Instead, I focused on the next phase of my plan. I had already moved all the money out of our joint accounts. Sarah would have no access to anything, not a single penny. It felt good to have control again, to take back what was mine. But money wasn't the only thing I wanted to reclaim. No, I was going for everything. I spent the next day at the office, poring over the family records that had been passed down to me. I had everything I needed to take Sarah down. I went through every legal document, every trust agreement, and every family asset that had ever been discussed. The Riley Trust, which my grandfather had set up decades ago, was the key. Rhett had been trying for years to get his hands on it, but the rules were clear. Only male descendants of the Riley line could access it, and only with the approval of the eldest male heir. That was me. I couldn't let Sarah and Rhett win. I couldn't let them walk away with everything, with my dignity. The trust was the only thing left from my family's wealth, and I was going to make sure it stayed out of their hands. Later that afternoon, I took a trip to the courthouse. I needed copies of the property records, specifically the deed to the house that Sarah and I had bought together. The house we had shared for years, the house that had once felt like a home. Now it felt like a prison, a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. The courthouse was quiet. As I waited for the clerk to retrieve the documents, I thought about how different everything had become. It wasn't just the house I was fighting for anymore. It was my future. The future I had built with my own two hands, only to have it ripped away by the two people I trusted most. When the clerk handed me the papers, I looked at them, the weight of the decision starting to settle in. The house was still in both of our names, and that gave me leverage. But it wasn't just the house I had to think about, it was everything. I knew I needed more. I wasn't just fighting for the past, I was fighting for control of my life. The next morning, I received a message from my lawyer, Jim Morrison. He'd been the one to help me with business contracts over the years, and I knew he understood how to navigate the legal landscape of Millfield. Jim had a reputation for being tough but fair, and right now that's exactly what I needed. I heard about the party, Thomas, Jim said when I answered the phone. I'm sorry, man. That's tough. But I'm also hearing rumors about Sarah. Word is she's been talking to her lawyer about the trust. I clenched my fist. I'm not just going to hand it over to her, Jim. She doesn't deserve it. No, she doesn't, Jim replied, his voice steady. But you need to be careful. You need to make sure you're protected. If this goes to court, you'll need evidence. You'll need more than just the trust agreement. You need a paper trail, something that proves she's been hiding things from you. I nodded, already knowing what I had to do. I'll get it. I've been keeping track of her spending. I've been watching her every move. She's been draining our savings and I'm going to make sure the whole town knows about it. Jim sighed. Just be careful. You're treading dangerous ground. But if you're sure about this, I'll help you. We'll get everything in order. You just need to make sure you've got all the evidence. Over the next few days, I spent every moment gathering information. I went through our bank statements, our credit card records, and the files in our home office. I found receipts for trips Sarah had taken, purchases she had made, luxury items, expensive dinners, hotel stays that I knew weren't for work. I had everything I needed. Now, it was time to let Sarah know I wasn't going to back down. The morning after I spoke to Jim, I sent Sarah a text. It was short, direct, and left no room for interpretation. I have everything I need. Don't make me expose you. I waited. By noon, Sarah called. I answered the phone, but I wasn't ready to be cordial. What the hell is wrong with you, Thomas? She shouted. You can't just go around threatening me. You're not going to get away with this. Oh, I think I will, I said calmly. You've crossed a line. You've humiliated me, drained our accounts, and now you think you can walk away with everything? You're wrong. Stop this, Thomas, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. This is insane. You're ruining everything. This is just a phase, okay? We can work through this. I laughed bitterly. Work through it? No, Sarah. There's no going back from this. I've seen everything I need to see. You've made your choice and I've made mine. This is over. The line went silent for a moment before Sarah's voice cracked. You think you're going to win, don't you? You think this is some kind of game? I'll fight you for everything. You'll regret this. I already regret it, I said, my voice steady. I regret ever trusting you. But don't worry, Sarah. You'll have plenty of time to think about it, because this is just the beginning. I ended the call before she could say anything more. The days that followed felt like a countdown, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension between Sarah and me. Every text, every call, every passing glance at the phone felt like a reminder of everything that had been torn apart. She had tried to apologize, she had even come by the house once asking to talk, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses anymore. I didn't want to hear her tell me that she loved me, not after everything. I'd already made my decision. She'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I spent the following days gathering my final pieces of evidence. I dug through every receipt, every financial statement, everything I could find. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Sarah had been living a double life, hiding everything from me. Her business trips weren't for work, they were for weekends away with David, my brother. I'd never imagined it could go this far. The depth of their betrayal left me numb, but also driven. I was no longer the passive husband who allowed his wife to walk all over him. I was the man fighting back, and I wouldn't stop until they lost everything. I had a plan. And this plan would ruin them both. The night before the scheduled meeting with Sarah's lawyer, I had a moment of clarity. Everything I had been working for, every step I had taken, was leading to this final confrontation. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. I called Jim. He had already been instrumental in making sure I had the legal backing I needed, but this was different. I wasn't just going after money anymore. I was going after their reputations, their lives. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal. I'm ready, Jim, I said when he picked up the phone. I've got everything we need. I'm going to expose her. I'm going to expose everything. Jim's voice was steady, but I could hear the concern beneath it. You're sure about this, Thomas? Once you do this, there's no going back. You'll destroy your family. Are you prepared for that? I hesitated. My mind raced, but I knew what I had to do. I don't have a choice anymore, Jim. They've already destroyed me. I'm just returning the favor. All right, I'll help you. Just know that once the truth comes out, there's no predicting how they'll react. I'm not worried about that. I'm ready for whatever comes next. The next morning, Sarah showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting her to come in person, but when she knocked, I knew it was time. I let her in, though every part of me wanted to shut the door and never look back. Her makeup was flawless as always, and she wore the same smile, the one she always used when she thought she could charm her way out of trouble. You're not going to win, Thomas, she said as soon as she stepped inside. Her voice was tight, but there was a hint of desperation in her eyes. You can't do this. I know about the trust, but I'm not going to let you ruin everything. You think you can just take everything from me? I won't let you. I stood up, staring her down. The anger, the hurt, it was all there, but so was something else. A deep, unshakable certainty that this was the right thing to do. You've already ruined everything, Sarah. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about showing you and David what happens when you mess with me. Her eyes narrowed. What are you going to do? You're just some mechanic, Thomas. You're nothing compared to me. You've got nothing left. That was when I made my move. I have everything, I said, pulling out the stack of documents I had been gathering over the last few days. I've got the receipts, the bank records, the emails. You think I didn't notice when you started draining our savings? You think I didn't see the way you've been lying to me, cheating on me with my brother? You've been playing me for a fool, Sarah, but not anymore. Her face paled as she realized what I was holding. You can't, she whispered, backing away from me. I can. And I will. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone? Well, now it's your turn. I walked over to the window and opened the blinds, letting in the sunlight. This is going to the press. This is going to every person in this town who thought you were perfect. You'll never escape this, Sarah. She took a step forward, reaching for the papers in my hand, but I pulled them away, out of her grasp. Don't even try, I said, my voice hardening. I've already spoken to Jim. This is all legal. You'll lose everything, your job, your reputation. Everything you've worked for is gone. Just like that. She was shaking now, and her voice cracked as she tried to gather herself. This isn't fair, Thomas. You can't do this. I love you. You're the one who changed. You stopped paying attention to me. You let me down first. I laughed bitterly. You love me? No, Sarah. You loved the idea of having everything. You loved the power, the control. And when you couldn't get it from me, you went to David. Well, now you're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything. I'm not going to let you walk away from this. Her face flushed with fury and she stood up straight, trying to regain her composure. You'll regret this, she spat. You're making a huge mistake. I'll fight back. I'm counting on it, I replied, my voice cold. But it's too late for you. You wanted this war? Well, you've got it. As Sarah stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her, I felt a sense of relief. The game had changed. There was no turning back now. I wasn't just the victim anymore. I was the one in control. And Sarah and David? They were about to lose everything. Later that evening, I sat down with Jim at a small bar in town. I handed him the stack of documents, the evidence I'd gathered, and the plan I had put together. Jim looked it over, his brow furrowing as he reviewed everything. It's airtight, Thomas, he said, looking up at me with a serious expression. Once we file this, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I nodded. I'm sure. I've been played for too long. It's time they felt the same way. Jim took a deep breath. All right. We'll make it happen. But remember, once it's out there, it's out there. There's no taking it back. I'm not going back, Jim. I'm ready. The next few days felt like an eternity. My phone was flooded with calls and messages from people I'd known for years, most of them trying to get the full story. The rumors were swirling around Millfield, and I knew that once the truth came out, it would tear through the town like wildfire. But I didn't care. The hard part was over. Sarah and David thought they had won. They thought I would back down, that I would be too weak to fight back. But they were wrong. I had already contacted Jim and the process had begun. The documents were filed, the public records were updated, and every little detail I had gathered was being made official. Jim had started the paperwork for the trust and the house, and soon the entire town would know the truth. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done, not just in terms of money but in terms of their lives. I wanted everyone to know what kind of people they truly were. People always think they can hide behind their charm, behind their perfect smiles and polished reputations. But sooner or later the truth catches up with you. And when it did, I was going to be there to make sure everyone saw just how ugly it really was. The first blow came quickly. A small leak, nothing major at first. One of Sarah's colleagues at the bank, a woman I'd never met, had called me asking to meet. When we sat down at the local diner, she didn't waste any time. I don't know if you know this, Thomas, she began, but Sarah has been telling everyone that you're the one who's been hiding money, that you've been draining your joint accounts without her knowledge. I almost laughed, but I kept my composure. Of course she is. That's what she does, lie. The woman lowered her voice, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Well, there's something else. She's been making moves behind the scenes. Talking about how she's going to leave you for good, and she's even mentioned David as her way out. She's been getting advice from her lawyer on how to manipulate the trust to get access to your grandfather's money. I felt the blood drain from my face. Of course. I should have known it wasn't just about me. It was about the trust. That's why she was willing to destroy everything, because she wanted it all. Thank you for telling me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I appreciate it. She nodded, her face flushed with the gossip she was clearly anxious to share. I just thought you should know. I couldn't sit by and watch her ruin everything for you. I've seen her act like she's the victim, and I know you're not the one who's been lying." I spent the next few hours processing what I had just learned. Sarah wasn't just trying to take me down, she was planning to take everything. I could see it now. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom, she was fighting for the money, for the status, for everything she thought she deserved. But she didn't deserve any of it. I called Jim and filled him in on the conversation I'd had. He listened carefully, taking notes, his silence only confirming what I already knew. Sarah had overplayed her hand. "I think it's time we made her realize that there's no easy way out," Jim said after a long pause. "We'll expose her. We'll put everything in the open in front of her friends, her colleagues, the people who have no idea what she's really like. We'll make sure everyone knows what she's been up to." The next step was going public. The following weekend, I invited a few of Sarah's closest friends to meet me at a local bar. I had prepared a small presentation, a series of documents, screenshots, receipts, and emails. I wasn't going to rely on rumors anymore. I was going to let the evidence speak for itself. They arrived one by one, unaware of what I had planned. At first they were friendly, offering me polite smiles, but there was an underlying tension in the air. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know what. Not yet. I stood up when they were all seated, my heart racing with anticipation. "I appreciate you all coming here today," I began, keeping my voice steady. "I know some of you are probably wondering why I asked you to meet. Well, I'm here to clear up a few things. To tell you all the truth about what's really been going on behind closed doors." Sarah's closest friend, Kelly, spoke up. "Thomas, this isn't the time. You're upset, we understand that, but you can't just—" "I'm not upset," I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. "I'm done being upset. I've been lied to, manipulated, and cheated on for months, and I've had enough. You all need to hear the truth, because if I don't say it now, Sarah and David will walk away unscathed." I pulled out the first document, a series of emails between Sarah and David. The messages were damning, revealing a secret affair that no one had suspected. Kelly gasped, and I watched as her face shifted from concern to disbelief. "What is this? Where did you get this?" "I've been paying attention," I replied. "I've been watching and I've been gathering the evidence. Sarah has been using you all, manipulating you, making you think she's the victim, when in reality she's been planning her escape from me for months. And she's not just leaving me for David, she's been trying to take everything, the trust, the house, the money." I saw the shock on their faces, but none of them spoke. They were speechless, and I knew they were starting to understand the full picture. The meeting ended in silence. The women left quickly, their faces a mix of confusion and guilt. I didn't care. I had done what I needed to do. The truth was out and there was no turning back. The next few days were even quieter. I didn't see Sarah. She didn't try to contact me. I wasn't sure if it was fear or shame, but I didn't care. The battle was shifting in my favor, and I was finally starting to feel like I was in control. I spent that evening walking through the garage, the familiar scent of oil and metal comforting me. I wasn't sure what the next move would be, but I knew this: Sarah and David's world was crumbling, and I was going to be the one to watch it fall apart. The quiet that followed felt unnerving. It was as if the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. I kept my routine: work at the garage, solitary and familiar, the comforting hum of engines and the feel of tools in my hands. But every moment I knew things were about to break wide open. Sarah had stayed silent. For the first time since the affair had come to light, she wasn't trying to reach out. I wasn't sure if she was regrouping, plotting her next steps, or if she was just stunned into silence. Either way, I had to be ready for whatever came next. I spent my evenings at home, going over the documents and evidence I had gathered. I made sure everything was airtight: copies of emails, financial transactions, records of her spending habits, even the recordings from our private conversations. I had it all. If Sarah thought she could come at me again, she would find that I was prepared for war. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was personal. It was about respect, about my dignity. I was done being the man who had been walked all over. I was done being the nice guy who took everything in stride. This time they were going to pay for everything. It wasn't until the middle of the week that I heard from Sarah again. It was a late-night text, the kind that always came with a string of excuses. But this one was different. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. Instead, she was demanding something. "We need to talk. I'm going to fight you for everything you've got, Thomas. I won't let you ruin my life. I want half. I deserve half." My stomach churned. I hadn't expected it to be this quick, but here it was, Sarah throwing down the gauntlet. She wasn't asking for reconciliation anymore. She was demanding that I give up everything I had worked for. I sat in the dark for a moment, staring at the message. Then I sent my reply, "You think you can take everything from me? Let's see who comes out on top. You've been warned." The following day I met with Jim. This time it wasn't just about the trust or the house. It was about the war I had started. Sarah and David had underestimated me, and now they were going to feel the consequences of that mistake. "You need to prepare yourself, Thomas," Jim said as we sat in his office, going over the final details. "Once we hit them with everything, they're not going to back down quietly. Sarah's not the type to just roll over. And David, he's going to fight dirty. You need to be ready for that." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of what was coming starting to hit me. I wasn't just preparing to defend myself in a divorce. I was preparing for battle. The evidence I had, the people I had spoken to, the plans I had made, this wasn't just going to end with a few legal papers. It was going to unravel everything. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. "Let them fight dirty. I'll show them what happens when you push a man too far." Jim nodded, his face serious. "All right, let's do this." The next day, I was at the courthouse, filing the final papers for the trust and the divorce. I wasn't waiting for Sarah's approval anymore. I wasn't asking for her permission. This was my fight, and I was taking it to the next level. I hadn't heard from David. I wasn't sure if he was trying to lay low or if he was too busy with Sarah to worry about me. But I knew it wouldn't be long before he showed up. He always had something to say when it came to getting his way. Later that afternoon, as I was finishing up at the garage, my phone buzzed. It was a text from David. "You don't get to decide this. You're not the one who gets to control everything anymore. This is bigger than you. You're going to lose." I didn't bother responding immediately. I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to back down. He wanted me to feel intimidated. But I wasn't the same man who had stood by while they ruined my life. I was different now, and that scared him more than anything. Instead, I sent a single message back: "We'll see who loses." By Friday, things were escalating quickly. Sarah had called her lawyer, and now the court proceedings were set to begin. Word had spread around town, and the whispers grew louder. People wanted to know the truth about what had happened, but more than that, they were curious about what I was going to do next. I didn't know if Sarah and David had expected me to crumble under the pressure, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I wasn't going to let them win. This wasn't just a legal fight. It was a fight for my life. I spent that night at home staring at the walls, wondering how it had all come to this. But deep down, I knew this was my moment. This was my chance to take back everything I had lost. And I was going to fight for it no matter what it took. The next morning, I got a call from Jim. "Thomas, we've got a problem. It looks like Sarah is going to drag this out. She's hired a big-time lawyer to fight for the trust, and we might be facing some serious opposition. She's not going to back down without a fight." "I didn't expect her to," I replied, already feeling the adrenaline start to pump through me. "Let her bring everything she has. We're going to win this." Jim hesitated for a moment. "All right. But you need to understand something. This isn't going to be easy. It's going to get dirty. And you need to be prepared for that." I took a deep breath, staring out the window. I'm ready for anything. The battle was about to begin, and there was no turning back. The next few days were a blur of court appointments, meetings with Jim, and relentless preparation. Every piece of evidence I had gathered was reviewed, and we made sure everything was in order. I knew Sarah and David were going to put up a fight, but I wasn't backing down. I had no choice. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my dignity, my self-respect, and taking back what they had stolen from me. The courthouse was filled with people, but all I could focus on was the battle ahead. As I walked through the halls, I could feel the eyes of the town on me. Whispers swirled around every corner, the gossip growing by the hour. I wasn't a quiet, reserved mechanic anymore. I was the man whose wife had betrayed him, whose brother had stolen from him. And the whole town was watching to see how this would play out. Jim had warned me about how the media could spin things, how they could twist the truth to suit their narrative. But I wasn't worried about that. I knew the truth, and I was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. The first day in court was nerve-wracking. I sat beside Jim, watching Sarah and her lawyer, a slick and polished man named Richard Gray, across the room. Sarah, dressed in her expensive suit, looked as if she had everything under control, but I could see the unease in her eyes. She knew the walls were closing in. The evidence I had against her was undeniable. Richard made his case, trying to paint me as the angry husband lashing out, claiming that my accusations were all just a product of bitterness. But I wasn't intimidated. I had proof, and I was ready to show it. I stood up when it was my turn to speak. The judge, a tired-looking man in his late 50s, glanced at me with a bored expression. But I wasn't here to impress him. I was here to expose the truth. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady, "I don't want to be here. This isn't where I thought I'd be after 20 years of marriage. But Sarah and David have left me no choice. I have been lied to, manipulated, and cheated on by the people I trusted the most. And I have the evidence to prove it." I pulled out the stack of documents and photos. There were emails between Sarah and David, showing the affair in vivid detail, text messages where Sarah spoke openly about her plans to leave me and take everything. The crowd in the courtroom shifted, some people glancing at each other in disbelief. Sarah's face turned red, but she remained silent. "I've been patient for far too long," I continued, holding the papers up for the court to see. "I've been a good husband, a good provider. But now I'm here to make sure everyone knows the truth about who Sarah really is. She has betrayed me and betrayed this family, all for money and status. This isn't just about a divorce anymore. This is about justice." The trial dragged on for what felt like weeks, each day bringing new revelations, new twists. I was determined to outlast them, to wear them down with the truth. Every time Sarah took the stand, I could see the cracks in her facade, the lies slipping through her words. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming that I was controlling, that I had neglected her needs. But nothing she said could take away the reality of her betrayal. David, however, was a different story. He hadn't expected me to fight back, and now that he was desperate. He tried everything to get under my skin, accusing me of being bitter, trying to turn the public against me. But I didn't flinch. I knew what he was doing. I had prepared for it. I had anticipated every move. I had the final piece of the puzzle ready, the one that would finish it all. It was the last day of the trial when I called David to the stand. Jim had advised against it. He knew it would get ugly. But I wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. David took the stand, his usually calm demeanor now showing signs of nervousness. I could see him trying to hide his unease, but I knew he was rattled. He wasn't used to being exposed. "David," I began, my voice calm, "I have one question for you." "Why?" He looked at me, confused for a moment. "Why what? Why did you think you could get away with this? Why did you think you could take everything from me and not face the consequences?" There was a long pause. David swallowed, shifting in his seat. He opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. "You used me," I continued, leaning forward. "You used my trust to get what you wanted. And you knew exactly what you were doing. The affair wasn't just about love. It was about the trust. It was about my inheritance, wasn't it?" David's face froze. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He knew I had him. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the final piece of evidence. The emails where David had openly discussed his plans to gain access to the trust fund, the money that could only be accessed through me. The truth came crashing down, and for the first time, David didn't have an answer. His silence spoke volumes. "Did you really think no one would notice?" I asked, letting the evidence speak for itself. "You wanted to take everything from me, my wife, my family, my future, and you thought you could get away with it. Well, you were wrong." The courtroom was silent. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Richard Gray, Sarah's lawyer, didn't know what to say. His case was crumbling. The judge finally spoke, his voice a calm contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. "Mr. Trosser, we will take a brief recess to deliberate the case. Please stay in the courtroom. We will resume shortly." I stood up, my hands trembling for the first time in weeks. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The truth had won. Sarah and David thought they had all the power, that they could control me, control the narrative. But in the end, it was me who held the cards. It was me who had the truth on my side. As I stood there, waiting for the final verdict, I felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, I had taken back control. And that, in itself, was victory. The brief recess felt like an eternity. I sat quietly in my seat, my hands folded tightly in my lap, every muscle in my body tense. I knew that this was the moment. Everything I had done, all the hours spent gathering evidence, all the sleepless nights, it was all about to come to a head. And I was ready. Sarah and David sat together, whispering under their breaths. I could see the anger bubbling in Sarah's eyes, the frustration in David's clenched jaw. I had exposed their secrets, their lies. They knew it. They were trying to figure out how to fight back, but it was too late. The judge returned to his seat, the gavel in hand, signaling that the break was over. His face was unreadable, but the tension in the room had reached its peak. The courtroom fell silent once more. "I've reviewed the evidence presented in this case," the judge said, his voice steady. Both parties have provided compelling arguments. However, there are clear issues regarding the validity of the claims against Mr. Trosser, and the evidence shows that Mr. Trosser's allegations are grounded in fact. The affair, the manipulation, the embezzlement, all are matters that will not go unaddressed. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah's face turned pale, her lips trembling. David looked away, his gaze shifting from the judge to the floor. The judge continued. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds in favor of Mr. Trosser. The divorce will proceed, and Mr. Trosser will retain full control over the family trust, including assets that were previously contested. Any claims for financial compensation beyond that will be dismissed. The weight of the words hit me like a tidal wave. I had won. The trust, the property, the money, everything I had fought for, it was mine. But more than that, I had exposed them. I had taken control of my life again, and I had done it in front of everyone who thought they could destroy me. The aftermath of the trial wasn't as sweet as I had expected. Sure, I had won everything I had been fighting for, but the victory felt hollow. In the days that followed, I could hear whispers of my success. People congratulated me on winning, but the look in their eyes was different. It wasn't admiration, it was something else. Fear maybe. Or pity. Sarah and David were gone. I didn't know where they had gone or if they even cared anymore. All I knew was that they had tried to tear my life apart, and now they were the ones left with nothing. The truth had come to light, and their perfect little world had crumbled. The town had shifted. People were looking at me differently. The man who had been taken advantage of, the man who had been humiliated, was now the man who had fought back. The guy who had been the victim was now the villain, and for the first time I didn't care. It was a few weeks after the trial when I received a call from Jim. He had been handling the final details of the divorce and the trust settlement. He was quiet on the other end of the line, his voice unusually serious. "Thomas, there's something you should know," Jim said. "I've been going over the final paperwork and there's something strange. There's a clause in the trust that I don't think you were aware of. It's tied to your grandfather's will." I sat up straighter, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. "What do you mean? What's in the will?" "There's a condition," Jim explained. "The trust can only be accessed if you're still married to the beneficiary. The will was specific about that. If you divorce before the trust distribution, it voids the entire thing." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so focused on the divorce, so determined to take everything from Sarah, that I hadn't even thought about the finer details. And now I was in danger of losing everything. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. "It means the trust could be rendered useless if the divorce is finalized," Jim said, his tone heavy with regret. "You'll need to make some moves quickly if you want to hold on to your grandfather's assets." I was silent for a moment, my mind racing. Everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, could be taken away because I hadn't paid attention to the fine print. That night, I found myself sitting in the garage, staring at the blueprints of my grandfather's old shop, the place where I had spent countless hours learning how to fix cars, how to become who I was. It felt like everything I had fought for was slipping through my fingers. Sarah had destroyed my family, David had betrayed me, and now my own grandfather's trust was on the line. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let them win. Not after everything I had been through. The next day I called Jim. We needed to act fast. I had to make sure the trust was safe. We had to find a way to rework the paperwork, to move quickly enough to ensure the assets were protected. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't about to let Sarah and David have the last laugh. "I'll do whatever it takes," I told Jim, my voice firm. "We're going to fix this. I'm not losing everything now." Jim didn't argue. He understood. We were in this together. I spent the following days digging into the legal details, making phone calls, and working with Jim to move things around. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the only thing left for me to do. Sarah and David had played their hand, but I wasn't done yet. The game wasn't over. When the final paperwork was filed, I finally felt a sense of relief. The trust was secure. The property was safe. I had done what I needed to do to make sure my future, and my grandfather's legacy, was protected. And I had done it without Sarah and David being able to take anything from me. It wasn't the victory I had hoped for. It wasn't the satisfaction I thought I'd feel. But as I stood in the garage looking at the cars I had restored over the years, I realized something. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just the guy who had been left behind. I had fought for what was mine and I had come out on top. And maybe that was enough. It had been a month since the court battle and the dust had settled. Or so I thought. My life had taken on a strange rhythm, one that I hadn't anticipated. The fight with Sarah and David was over, but it felt like something was missing. I had won the financial battle, sure, but I still felt like I was living in the ruins of my former life. The people in town were treating me differently. No longer the mechanic who kept to himself, I had become something of a spectacle. They all saw me as the man who had stood up, who had fought back when life had knocked him down. There were whispers behind my back, and though I had always been a private man, I couldn't ignore the attention. Some people seemed to respect me more while others gave me pitying looks. But the thing that gnawed at me the most was Sarah. She hadn't tried to contact me since the trial. Her absence was deafening. I spent most of my days working in the garage. It was where I felt the most at peace, surrounded by the cars I had spent my life fixing. But lately the work didn't soothe me the way it used to. I found myself distracted, my thoughts constantly drifting to Sarah, where she was, what she was doing, and how I hadn't heard a word from her since that day in court. One evening as I was locking up the garage, I heard the sound of a car engine pulling up. I looked out, expecting to see one of the regulars from the neighborhood, but instead, it was a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. The engine stopped and the car's headlights dimmed. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. The driver's side door opened and Sarah stepped out. She looked different. The woman who had once been so meticulously put together now seemed disheveled, worn. Her eyes, which had always gleamed with ambition and control, were now hollow, tired. "Thomas," she said, her voice soft but steady, "we need to talk." I stood there for a moment, processing her presence. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, tell her to get lost. But the other part of me, the part that had been aching with unanswered questions, wanted to know what she had come here for. I motioned for her to step inside. "Let's talk then." We sat across from each other in the small office of the garage, the faint hum of the air conditioning the only sound breaking the silence. Sarah stared at the floor for a moment before finally meeting my gaze. "I know I hurt you," she began, her voice tinged with regret. "I can't undo that. But I've been thinking a lot since the trial. About what happened, what I did. And I realized something." She trailed off as though the words were hard to find. I wasn't in a hurry to hear her explanations. After everything she'd done, I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. But I listened. "I never really loved you the way I should have," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I did, but I was chasing something else. I was chasing power, success, all the things that seemed so important to me. And I dragged you along, didn't I?" I didn't respond right away. There was a knot in my chest, a mix of anger and sadness that I wasn't sure how to release. "So what now?" I asked. "You think showing up here changes anything?" Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching mine, as if looking for any sign that I would forgive her. "No. I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. But I came because I want to make things right, Thomas. I want to start over. Not with you but with myself." I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. There was something different about her. Maybe it was the vulnerability in her eyes, or maybe it was the realization that I wasn't the one she had to apologize to anymore. She was apologizing to herself. And even though I had every reason to hate her, to turn my back on her for good, I couldn't help but feel a strange sympathy. "You've taken everything from me," I said quietly, almost as a confession. "But I've taken something from myself too. I spent years trying to be the guy everyone wanted me to be. The good husband, the good provider. I ignored the fact that I was losing myself in the process. I don't know who I am anymore." Sarah stayed silent, the weight of my words hanging between us. There was no easy answer. There never had been. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she finally said. "I'm asking for a chance to fix the damage I've done. Not to you but to me. I need to rebuild. And I need to make sure I don't keep running from the person I've become." She left soon after, and I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. A part of me wanted to go after her, to tell her that everything could be fixed, that we could start over. But I knew better now. I had fought too hard for my own peace of mind to give it up for someone who had never truly seen me. The next few days passed in a blur. Sarah's visit had left me with more questions than answers. I couldn't stop thinking about her. And yet, I knew deep down that the damage had already been done. The life we once had was gone and there was no going back. One evening, I was closing up the garage when I received an unexpected call. It was Jim. "I think you should know something," he said. "I've been looking into Sarah's financial records a little more, and there's something you might want to consider. She's been making some large transfers out of your joint accounts, and it looks like she's been hiding assets." My stomach dropped. It wasn't over. Sarah wasn't done with me yet. She had more tricks up her sleeve. "We'll need to act fast," Jim said. This could complicate things for you. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. Sarah had been playing me from the start. Everything she said during that visit, every word of regret, was just a ruse. She was still scheming, still trying to take everything I had worked for. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The weight of the call from Jim lingered in my mind like a storm cloud. I knew Sarah wasn't just letting me walk away free and clear. She had been playing a long game and I had been too blinded by everything else to see it. But now I knew. She hadn't changed. She hadn't learned a damn thing. I spent the next few days working with Jim, combing through the financial records. It wasn't easy. Sarah was a master at hiding things, a skill she had honed over years of manipulating people. But Jim was thorough and he didn't miss a detail. Every account, every transaction, every transfer Sarah had made out of our joint accounts, it all came to light. "Thomas, I don't need to tell you how serious this is," Jim said when we met in his office. "Sarah's been pulling large sums and I'm talking about a lot of money here. This isn't just about some petty theft. This could be fraud, and if we can prove it, she'll be in deep legal trouble." I stared at the documents in front of me. There it was, the hard evidence. Sarah had been siphoning off money for months, all while pretending to be the remorseful wife who had come to terms with her mistakes. It made me sick to my stomach. All that regret she had shown, all the tears, the apologies, it had been nothing but a ploy to lull me into a false sense of security. She hadn't changed. She was still the same calculating, manipulative woman I had married. "I won't let her get away with this," I muttered under my breath. Jim nodded. "We need to act fast, Thomas. If she gets away with this, not only will you lose the money, but the divorce settlement will be tainted as well. It could go back to court and everything we've done so far will be for nothing." The next few weeks were a blur of legal maneuvers, depositions, and meetings. Jim and I worked tirelessly to prepare our case. I knew Sarah wouldn't give up easily. She was cunning, and I had no doubt she would try to cover her tracks or shift the blame elsewhere. But I wasn't going to let her win again. This time I was prepared. The legal battle escalated quickly. I filed for a motion to freeze all her assets until we could get to the bottom of her financial dealings. Sarah fought back hard, her lawyer throwing every legal argument they could muster, but we had the proof. The money trail was undeniable. Finally, the day came when we had to present our findings in court. As I walked into the courtroom, the familiar coldness of the space settled over me. This wasn't about love or loss anymore. This was about justice, about holding Sarah accountable for everything she had done. I took my seat beside Jim. Across the room I saw Sarah and her lawyer, looking as composed as ever. But I could see the cracks beneath her surface. She was rattled. And for the first time I wasn't afraid of her. The judge entered the room and the proceedings began. Jim laid out our case, presenting the financial documents, the transactions Sarah had hidden, the lies she had told. There was no way around it. Sarah had stolen from me, had taken money that wasn't hers to claim. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood up, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted her blazer. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but betraying a hint of anxiety. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. My actions were not intentional. I was only trying to secure a future for myself and David. It was wrong, yes, but I was scared. I didn't know how to handle things." The courtroom fell silent as her words hung in the air. I could see the people around her, even her lawyer, beginning to look uneasy. She had tried to paint herself as the victim once more, but this time no one was buying it. "Your Honor, I ask for leniency," Sarah continued, her voice wavering. "I was under a great deal of stress. My actions were driven by fear, not malice." I clenched my fists in my lap, fighting to keep my composure. She was still playing the victim. But I had seen enough. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Trosser, do you have anything to add?" I stood up, my voice calm but firm. "Yes, Your Honor." Sarah's actions weren't about fear or insecurity. They were about greed. She took what wasn't hers, knowing exactly what she was doing. And she did it with the full intention of ruining my life. I've already lost so much because of her. But I'm not going to lose everything. Not now, not ever. The judge nodded slowly, his eyes moving between Sarah and me. "This court will deliberate, but based on the evidence presented, I see no reason why the financial fraud charges should not be pursued. The motion to freeze the assets stands." The days following the court hearing were tense. Sarah and David didn't give up easily. They tried to make their case in the court of public opinion, spreading rumors, casting doubts on my character. But it didn't matter. I had the law on my side. And the truth had a way of shining through, no matter how hard they tried to bury it. The investigation into Sarah's financial misconduct grew more intense. The authorities began to get involved and soon her assets were frozen. The money she had stolen was traced back, and she found herself facing serious charges. Sarah was no longer the powerful woman who had once controlled me. She was just another person facing the consequences of her actions. And David? Well, David had run. He had packed up and left town, disappearing without a trace. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just a coward who had abandoned his family, hoping he could escape the mess he had helped create. But there was no escaping the truth. Months passed and Sarah's world began to crumble. The legal battles dragged on, but every step brought me closer to the end of this chapter. She had lost her position at the bank, her reputation in ruins. People stopped taking her calls. Friends who had once supported her pulled away, realizing the kind of person she truly was. I never spoke to her again. We didn't need to. I had no desire to hear her apologies or listen to any more of her excuses. The truth had already been spoken. The damage had been done and Sarah had shown her true colors. I focused on rebuilding my own life. I wasn't the same man I had been before all of this started. I had learned the hard way that some battles were worth fighting, and some battles you fought to win, not for the sake of victory but for the sake of your own peace of mind. The garage became more than just work for me. It became a symbol of resilience, of starting over. Every car I fixed, every engine I rebuilt was a step toward rebuilding myself. I didn't need Sarah or David to define me anymore. I had taken back my life. The war was over. But for me it wasn't about the end of a marriage or the defeat of my enemies. It was about reclaiming who I was. It was about learning that you could survive even the worst betrayals and come out stronger on the other side. And I was finally free. The days that followed the trial were filled with a strange sort of peace. After everything that had happened, I had expected to feel some kind of overwhelming relief. But instead there was only a quiet, steady calm. I was no longer tangled up in the chaos Sarah and David had left behind. But that calmness came at a cost. It felt like I had lost something, not just the life I had known but a part of myself. I spent most of my days in the garage working on cars. It wasn't glamorous but it was honest work. I loved the hum of the engine, the satisfying click of the wrench tightening a bolt. I couldn't explain it but each car I restored seemed to help me restore a part of myself. The engine was like my own heart. Beat by beat I was putting things back together. The rust, the dirt, the wear, it was all there but it could be fixed. And for the first time in months I realized that maybe I too could be fixed. One day while I was tinkering with a 1969 Mustang that had seen better days, I noticed a familiar figure standing outside the garage. My heart skipped a beat. It was Tom, one of the old guys from the gym. He had been a friend of my father's and had known me since I was a kid. We had kept in touch off and on over the years, but I hadn't seen him in a while. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Marlowe," he said with a smirk, leaning against the doorframe. "You've been hiding in here for weeks. Thought you might have finally lost your mind." I chuckled, wiping my hands on a rag. "Maybe I have. But at least my mind's got a better handle on things than it did before." Tom nodded, walking in and looking at the car I was working on. "You know, I heard about what happened with Sarah. And I'll be honest, I didn't think you'd pull through it. But here you are, still standing, still fixing cars. Hell, you're probably better off without her." His words stung but I didn't show it. "It's complicated," I said, running my hand over the hood of the car, staring at the way the light reflected off the sleek metal. "A part of me still wonders what I could have done differently." Tom shook his head, his face hardening. "There's nothing you could have done. You gave her everything and she threw it all away. Don't let that woman have any more space in your head. You've spent enough of your life trying to fix people, Marlowe. It's time to fix yourself." I didn't respond immediately. The words hit harder than I expected. He was right, but I didn't know how to stop the cycle of doubt and regret that had been gnawing at me. Tom could see it in my eyes. He always could. "You're doing what you're supposed to," he said quietly, almost as if reading my thoughts. "Fixing the things that need fixing. But you've got to start with yourself. It's been a rough road, I get it. But you're not that guy anymore. And you don't need to keep looking over your shoulder." I didn't have an answer for him. I wasn't sure what to say. The last few months had been a blur of legal paperwork, betrayals, and trying to hold everything together. But somewhere in the back of my mind I had always thought that if I just worked harder, if I just kept fighting, I could fix everything. Fix the mess Sarah had made, fix the relationships that had shattered. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I had been so focused on fixing things for everyone else that I had forgotten how to fix myself. The next few days passed in a quiet haze. The garage kept me busy but Tom's words stuck with me. I had spent years trying to save people. Sarah, David, even my daughter Darla. But I had never stopped to think about saving myself. Every night I came home, sat in my recliner, and replayed everything that had happened. The lies, the cheating, the money, how had I been so blind? How had I let them tear everything apart? But now, in the silence of my thoughts, I realized that I couldn't change the past. The damage was done. What mattered now was what I did moving forward. One evening as I was locking up the garage, I heard a car pull up again. This time it was my daughter Darla. She had been quiet since the trial, avoiding me and keeping to herself. I hadn't expected her to visit, but here she was, standing at the entrance with her arms crossed. "Dad," she said softly, her voice lacking the usual confidence. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure what to say. After everything, I had no idea where we stood. "I know I haven't been the best daughter," Darla continued, looking at the ground. "I've been selfish and I've hurt you. I didn't think it was possible for things to get worse, but I see now that I've made it worse for you." I studied her face, trying to find the girl I had once known. She looked older now, more tired, more guarded. I hadn't realized how much she had changed until this moment. "I should have been there for you, Dad," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I let everything that happened with Mom and Uncle Rhett cloud my judgment. I let them get in my head." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Darla, I'm not perfect, but I've tried. And I know you've been hurt. But I can't keep pretending like everything's okay when it's not." She nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." I stood there for a moment, my emotions a tangled mess. My daughter, the one person I had tried to protect, had betrayed me just like Sarah. But now I realized something. Darla wasn't entirely to blame. She had been manipulated just like I had. "I don't know what to say," I said, my voice thick. "But I appreciate the apology. And I think we can start over. But it's going to take time." She looked up at me, her face softening. "I'll do whatever it takes, Dad. I just want to make things right." The next few weeks were a quiet rebuilding process. Darla and I talked more, trying to bridge the gap that had grown between us. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like we were too far gone to fix anything. But with each conversation, with each small gesture, I felt a glimmer of hope. I knew it wasn't going to be an easy road. It wasn't going to be perfect. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. The story of Sarah, David, and the chaos they had left behind felt like a distant memory now. I wasn't the same person I had been when it all started. But maybe that was a good thing. Maybe the man I had become was stronger, wiser, and more at peace with who he was. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was mine. And I was finally okay with that. The quiet rhythm of life had settled back into my bones. The garage had become more than just a place where I worked. It had become my sanctuary, my escape. There was something about the steady hum of engines and the smell of oil and grease that made me feel grounded. Maybe it was the familiarity, the routine, or maybe it was the realization that I had carved out a life for myself after everything had crumbled. Darla and I were working through our issues. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but it felt like progress. She spent more time with me at the garage, helping with the paperwork, learning about the cars, and slowly mending the bond we had once shared. I could see the change in her. Her eyes were no longer filled with resentment, and the walls she had built around herself were starting to come down. I couldn't say I had completely forgiven her. That would take time, just like everything else. But I could see that she was trying, and for the first time in a long while, that was enough for me. One afternoon, I was working on a 1970 Dodge Charger that had come in for a complete restoration when I got a call. It was Jim. "Thomas, I've got some news," he said, his voice low and serious. "I don't want to make you nervous, but we've received word that Sarah might be trying to make a move again. She's not done with you." My heart sank. I thought, after everything, Sarah had finally faded from my life. But it seemed I was wrong. "What's she doing now?" I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. Jim hesitated for a moment. "She's trying to get her assets unfrozen. She's talking to her lawyer about appealing the court's decision. They're pushing hard to get access to her money again." A mix of frustration and anger burned in my chest. After everything she had done, after everything I had fought for, she was still trying to pull me back into her world. "I won't let her get away with it," I said, my voice sharp. "I thought we were done with her." "We are," Jim assured me. "But I just wanted you to be aware. It's going to get ugly again, and you need to be prepared." I hung up the phone and leaned against the car, my mind racing. I had been trying so hard to put everything behind me, to rebuild what Sarah had shattered. But it seemed like she wasn't going to let me go that easily. The next few days felt like a waiting game. Sarah's lawyer was relentless, filing motion after motion in an attempt to get her hands on the money she had stolen. It felt like the world was conspiring against me, trying to drag me back into the chaos. But this time I was different. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I started making calls. I reached out to some old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. The truth was, I wasn't just fighting Sarah anymore. I was fighting to hold on to everything I had rebuilt. I was fighting for my peace of mind, for my daughter, and for the life I had worked so hard to create. One evening, as I was closing the garage for the night, I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up. It was Darla. She had been spending more time at the house lately, trying to mend things between us. She stepped out of the car and looked at me, a hesitant expression on her face. "Dad," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what happened. About Mom." I wiped my hands on my jeans and turned to face her. "Darla, I've said this before and I'll say it again. You don't have to explain everything. I know you were caught in the middle. But I need you to know that I'm not angry with you anymore." She nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I don't know if I can ever fix everything I did, Dad. I can't change the past, but I want to try to do better. I want to make things right with you." I stepped toward her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know you do. And you're already doing it. You don't need to fix everything at once. Just take it one day at a time." Darla smiled, but it was a quiet, uncertain smile. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time I start helping you with the garage. Learning the ropes. Maybe I can help you rebuild everything that's been broken." I felt a flicker of hope in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I could see the possibility of a future. One where Darla and I could work together, build something together, and maybe, just maybe, heal from all the pain. Over the following weeks, Darla began spending more and more time at the garage. We worked together on small projects. Nothing major at first, just the basics. She learned how to clean carburetors, how to replace spark plugs, how to fix small dents and scratches. It was slow work, but it felt like progress. Every day that passed, I felt the distance between us closing. We talked more, about the past, about the future, about everything we had lost and everything we still had to gain. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally on the path to healing. One afternoon I was working on a new project, a 1957 Chevy Bel Air, when I heard a knock on the door. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked over to answer it. To my surprise, it was Sarah. She stood there, her hair perfectly styled, her usual confident expression on her face. But there was something different about her. She looked tired. "Thomas," she began, her voice almost pleading, "I know we've had our differences and I know I've made a lot of mistakes. But I'm asking for one last chance. I've lost everything. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I need your help." I stood there, staring at her, my emotions swirling inside me. After everything she had done, I had no desire to help her. I wanted to slam the door in her face and walk away. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the vulnerability in her eyes. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time, I saw a woman who had finally realized what she had lost. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" I asked, my voice steady, yet tinged with the anger I had been holding back for so long. She took a deep breath. "I want to make things right. Not with you," she paused, "but with myself. I've lost everything, Thomas. My career, my reputation, and I need your help to rebuild it." I stared at her, trying to read her. Was this genuine, or just another one of her manipulative schemes? I didn't know anymore. But something inside me knew that I had already given her enough of my time, my energy, my life. "I'm done helping you, Sarah," I said firmly. "You made your choices and now you have to deal with the consequences." She looked at me for a moment, her face falling. "I understand," she whispered, turning to leave. I watched her walk away and for the first time I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Sarah was a part of my past, one that was now completely behind me. The next few months passed without much incident. Sarah faded from my life entirely and I focused on rebuilding my relationships. With Darla, with the community, and most importantly, with myself. I had learned that sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't letting go of others. It's letting go of the person you were before and accepting who you've become. And so I rebuilt. I rebuilt the garage. I rebuilt my life. And slowly I rebuilt my heart.